Hey everybody, it's Tex with the Open Source Office once again, and today we have another organization spotlight meeting with Philip with Anastasia Labs, and he's going to tell us some more about what they do. Philip, do you want to give yourself a brief introduction?
Yeah, sure. My name is DiSarro. I'm the CEO and founder of Anastasia Labs. Anastasia Labs is a research and development firm specializing in Cardano smart contract and DApp protocol development.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. We'll get into just a few questions to clarify some things. Would you be able to provide an overview of Anastasia Labs' main mission within the Cardano ecosystem?
Yeah, so I founded Anastasia Labs with the sole intention of increasing the availability of open source production grade DApp protocol code throughout the ecosystem. One of the main pain points in Cardano was the lack of open source production code bases to build from. And this really hurts the ecosystem in like very tangible financial and time ways. So for instance, if a new team is deciding what protocol they want to build on, right? And there are two options. One where they can start from an existing body of work and add their business specific logic and just focus on feature development and their business requirements. Or another where they have to start from the ground up, build everything, including the infrastructure, the DApp, the base of the DApp, from scratch, right? And there's nothing they can draw from or build on top of, then it makes it much less attractive. So when Anastasia Labs was founded, our main focus was just releasing tons of open source smart contracts and end-to-end dApps, so that new projects coming in, one, can use this as reference material for learning design patterns and learning how to build production applications, and two, so that people could build off of this existing work instead of having to build everything from scratch, which results in a lot of redundant spending, right? Because if there are 10 apps that are trying to build like very similar products, then the base, the core infrastructure of most of that product is the same, right? And then at the top, you get some deviation, right? Some might have features that others don't. But to get to that point, they all wind up having to build the base, right? And however much time and money they invest into building that is redundantly spent and could have been spent in more feature development or hiring more devs or more security.
Absolutely. Well, that sounds super important. And a few of the things that you mentioned at the tail end there tie into the next question. So, of course, that the DApps, as you mentioned, and the smart contracts, of course, that tells how this integrates with the Cardano blockchain. But what are some unique features of what you are building that help enhance data reliability and security?
Right. So for security, we have a number of auditing tools that we've both built and are building. For instance, one of our flagship tooling releases is this formal verification toolkit for Cardano smart contracts. One of the great things about Cardano and building applications on Cardano is that the languages that we use and the tooling that we use is very well suited for formal verification, which is a mechanism you can use to mathematically prove the correctness of a program, right? And this is really important when you're building mission critical applications like financial operating systems, right? Like lending platforms, trading platforms, all of these things, because at the end of the day, right, when you're building a non-custodial platform, the application logic must be airtight, because if there's any issues, then user funds get lost, they can be stolen by malicious actors, etc. Right? So that's why the ecosystem put so much importance on designing, this facilitation for formal methods. But up until this point, we haven't seen a toolkit released that has made this accessible to your everyday developer, right? Formal methods is a very hard field to break into. Typically, the people that are doing it are either masters, have their master's degree in formal methods or PhD in formal methods, and it can be very expensive, especially for small teams on Cardano, to either hire these people or onboard themselves to be able to formally prove the correctness of their protocols. So what we've released is this toolkit that basically brings down the barrier to entry. So any standard developer should be able to quickly go through the documentation and start writing proofs about the correctness of their DApp.
Wonderful. So, what are some primary use cases for the Anastasia Labs products here on the Cardano ecosystem?
Right. So the great thing about what we've done is that no matter what you're building on Cardano, you should be able to derive some utility or some benefit from using the open source stuff that we've already built, right? So to use any of our stuff, existing works, it's all free, it's all open source. And the goal is to reduce the redundant spending in the ecosystem. So, right, if you're considering, you're starting a new project on Cardano, maybe one of the very common things is, okay, well, you want to release a token and you want to have some team vesting schedule, right? This has a lot of complications. One, like, how do we trust that everyone is going to obey the vesting schedule? Two, how do we trust everyone's going to get paid, that these tokens aren't going to be dumped, who's custodying these funds? So it's very common that people will use smart contracts to do this vesting, right? And this means you have to hire a developer to build the smart contracts, and instead of building your actual platform, you're building like infrastructure for like vesting schedules and tokens for your team, which doesn't make much sense. So instead of doing this, you can use our existing plug and play solution for vesting. And in fact, large projects throughout the ecosystem like Charlie 3 and others have done this, right? And it saved them tens of thousands of dollars from having to go build and audit their own. And there are many other such applications. If you go through our GitHub, right, vesting is one, simple peer-to-peer trading is another. Often people will want to trade assets that aren't standard, for instance, like NFTs or things, or have like weird trades, like you maybe trade a few NFTs for other NFTs or assets, and this isn't facilitated on a DEX. So what people do is they have a middleman, right, where you'll send your assets to this middleman, and the middleman will facilitate the trade between two parties, and this is really risky, and a lot of it's facilitated. It just breeds a lot of scamming. So another thing is, you can use this plug and play solution to support swaps on any website, for instance. Subscription payments is another one we have. Staking, a lot of projects in the ecosystem like to have a token that you can stake for something, either rewards or a voting power or something like that. That's another plug and play solution we have. And the great thing about all of these is you don't have to know anything about Cardano to deploy them on your application. So for instance, if you're a coffee shop or just like any web application in the world, right, and you know nothing about blockchain, but you think, maybe I want to, accept payments in ADA, or I want to allow ADA subscriptions, or I want to, have some sort of NFT functionality that tracks my coffee. All of these things, you can go to our plug and play solutions in our GitHub and just plug and play them into your website without understanding Cardano or UTXO or anything.
That's all super efficient, and it sounds very interesting. Or sorry, I should say that sounds interesting and very efficient. I know you mentioned maybe a few organizations or projects that have picked up on some of your tools here. Is there any one or two that you might highlight as key success stories or the most notable?
Yeah. So the vesting certainly has been picked up by many teams throughout the ecosystem. In fact, we don't even know all the teams at this point. And a lot of the time it's like, it comes as a surprise to me when I find out people are using our stuff. I think one of probably our most impactful releases has been this design patterns repository, which provides detailed explanations of sort of state-of-the-art DApp design patterns for developers, because onboarding into Cardano is very tough, and even if you're an extremely competent programmer in any other field, even the most complex fields, breaking into the Cardano ecosystem is very difficult because you need a large body of available open source work to be able to learn best practices. And with a fragmented ecosystem where everyone is using different tooling, it can be very complicated to just learn the techniques which are very non-standard. For instance, like the best practices in Cardano are very different than the best practices anywhere else. So we released this design patterns repository, which explains in detail all these state-of-the-art design patterns. And yeah, I've been constantly referred to this by other teams. And I'm like, yes, I'm the dude that wrote this. So, it's been great to see that. I think it's become pretty much standard for every team when onboarding developers in large projects to show them this. In fact, IOG, I've seen this used and shared throughout IOG to explain topics to staff. I've seen this shared at MinSwap, at SundaySwap, on most major apps on Cardano.
Yes. Well, great. Thank you for sharing. And I think that's really alluding to the point where education or assets that help us educate are super, super important as far as, like you mentioned, getting onboarded here and having access to those open source bodies of work. If there's not a ton of education in those open source bodies, that can just further complicate the process. We'll get a few more questions here for you. Nothing too crazy, but what would you say the future plans are for Anastasia Labs in terms of development, new features, new products?
Right. So of course we'll continue to release open source public utility smart contracts and try to create, a very large expanding body of work that other developers can build on top of and draw from to make the onboarding process easier. We'll continue to expand our design patterns repository to keep it up to date and help onboarding new developers. And one of the big shifts that we've had as a company is we did a retrospective on the DApp ecosystem when we first came in and where we are now, and the amount of open source code that people can learn from has increased significantly to a point where now it's not so compelling to argue that, it's hard to develop on Cardano, it's hard to onboard, because the amount of open source code that people can learn from has tremendously increased, such that you can look at the best applications on Cardano, see the code, see how they're built, and learn relatively quickly. So we're very satisfied with this, and we thought, okay, well, what's the next step? We looked at other ecosystems, for instance, Ethereum, and the biggest improvements, the biggest drivers for economic growth in Ethereum weren't sort of core protocol changes. In fact, the changes to the core Ethereum protocol in the past 3 or 4 years have been relatively minimal and not very well received. The biggest catalyst for growth were independent teams building layer 2 solutions. For instance, Polygon, Optimism, Arbitrum, ZK Sync, all of these things have driven massive amounts of economic growth to Ethereum layer 1. And all of them rely on Ethereum for security, but allow sort of their own a deviation in features, right? Which is important for blockchain because there's this trilemma, right? And one blockchain can't suit every single application. You need to make trade-offs whenever you're building a blockchain. Security, scalability, decentralization. And for instance, one application might really value security, but another might really value scalability. And that means that one blockchain wouldn't be the best place for those two applications. The nice thing about layer 2 solutions is they allow you to build solutions that have the features that applications need without leaving the layer 1. So for instance, if someone needs an extremely high throughput blockchain, right now, Cardano might not be very well suited to their use case. But things like Hydra and other layer 2 solutions would allow them to build that without leaving the ecosystem. And what we're building now, Midgard, our flagship product, is a optimistic rollup for Cardano, which is a framework for building layer 2s. So we don't want this to be the layer 2 on Cardano. We want it to be much like Optimism in that it's an SDK that people can use to build layer 2s for their applications or to meet their needs. So for instance, if you want to have like a federated network, if you want to have like a supply chain tracking layer 2 or a gaming layer 2, all of these things can be built via Midgard. And Midgard itself will exist as a standalone layer 2, of course, but we think this is really going to be a large catalyst for growth in the ecosystem, because all of a sudden you're going to see a ton of different layer 2s that rely on Cardano for economic security, right? And that means, if you can pitch a layer 2 to an application that might not want to build on Cardano, right? For instance, Meld left the ecosystem because some concerns with liquidations and throughput. If you can get them to build on a layer 2, then essentially you're getting that economic activity on the layer 1, right? Because the layer 2 relies on Cardano and pays to Cardano for security. And we think this is going to be a huge catalyst for growth, and we're very excited about this.
That's a lot of exciting things going on, and I think we're still in a great position where it's hard to say that there's too much going on, right? The last part here, kind of rounded out, how would you say that Anastasia Labs engages with the community, and what are some ways that the community can get involved?
Yeah, you can join our Discord. You can contact me either on Discord, Twitter, or email. And yeah, the best way to engage is with technical questions, because that's what we're here to help you do. Also, if you have any questions on how to use any of our open source repositories, any of the tooling that we've released, if you have things that you feel are missing from the ecosystem, for instance, you'd like to have some open source solution for XYZ and it doesn't exist, then definitely reach out to us. And if there's enough demand, for sure, it's something that we would release.
Great. Thank you. So we'll make sure that we get some contact information for you and for the Discord server, and we'll make sure that we attach that in the description here. For everyone giving us a little watch, please don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Let us know how it's going. And also don't forget you can get involved here in the Cardano ecosystem by becoming a member of Intersect as well. Well, thanks so much, and we'll see y'all next time.
Have a nice one.